When most people hear the word legacy, they think of money, an inheritance, a will, a number written on a document that gets passed down after someone is gone. But that's only a small piece of the truth. Real legacy is not measured in dollars, it's measured in impact. It's not about how much you leave behind, but how intentionally you choose to live while you're here. Legacy is meaning in motion. It's the sum of your values, your vision, and the systems you create to carry those things forward. It's the way you treat people, the decisions you model, the habits you pass on often without saying a word. And while it can certainly include financial gifts, its true power lies in what those gifts represent: your priorities, your beliefs, your commitment to something larger than yourself. This audiobook is not just about how to transfer wealth. It's about how to live with clarity and lead with purpose. Whether you have a little or a lot, your legacy is already forming in every choice you make. The question isn't if you're building a legacy, it's what kind. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be intentional. Because when you start viewing legacy as something you live, not just something you leave, you step into a kind of leadership that lasts far beyond your lifetime. And that's where the real story begins. Chapter 1. What is a legacy? Beyond wills and wealth. When most people hear the word legacy, their minds leap to the image of a will being read in a lawyer's office, a grand estate being divided among family members, or perhaps a final act of generosity in the form of a trust fund. But this definition is too narrow, too transactional, and far too late. Because a true legacy doesn't begin when your life ends. It begins the moment you choose to live with intention. Legacy is not just about what you leave behind. It's about how you live right now. It's the echo of your choices, the ripple of your habits, the example of your values. It's not measured by the size of your bank account, but by the depth of your impact. And in this chapter, we'll uncover how legacy is built, not on paper, but in daily decisions, quiet leadership, and the long shadows cast by who you are. Let's start with the truth. Everyone leaves a legacy. Whether you plan it or not, you're leaving one. The real question is whether it's the one you intend to leave or the one that happens by default. Your financial footprint, the lessons you've modeled, the conversations you've avoided, the systems you've put in place or failed, to all of these shape what comes after you. Every decision you make, every value you live by, and every relationship you nurture becomes part of the story your family will tell long after you're gone. Think of legacy like a garden. Some people leave behind overgrown weeds, confusion, and emotional tangles because they never took the time to prepare the soil. Others leave a carefully cultivated field full of clarity, fruit, and future possibility. The difference isn't luck, it's leadership. And that leadership doesn't require millions of dollars. You don't need to be wealthy to build a meaningful legacy. In fact, some of the most powerful legacies in history were built not with money, but with principles, love, and clarity. A single mother teaching her children the value of hard work. A grandfather passing down the habit of saving with purpose. A community member quietly giving and mentoring without fanfare. These aren't financial statements, they're statements of identity. Yet we live in a culture obsessed with wealth as the ultimate symbol of success. That's why many people wrongly believe legacy is only for the rich. But wealth alone, without wisdom, can be a curse. History is full of examples where unprepared heirs squandered fortunes within a generation. What was missing? A plan, a conversation, a guide, a sense of purpose. So if legacy isn't just about money, what is it really made of? At its core, legacy has three essential dimensions: values, systems, and resources. First, values. These are the principles that shape how you move through the world. Honesty, generosity, discipline, curiosity. These invisible forces drive your behavior and ripple into your family, your work, your community. If you've ever heard someone say, "My father always told me," or "My mother always lived by this rule," you've witnessed legacy in action. Values don't need to be spoken in grand speeches. They're modeled in how you show up every day, how you respond to stress, how you treat strangers, how you handle money. Second, systems. This includes the habits, tools, and decision-making frameworks that help future generations carry those values forward. It's one thing to say, I want my kids to be responsible with money. It's another thing to show them how to create a budget, open a Roth IRA, track their spending, or give to causes they care about. Systems make values real. Without them, values float in the abstract. With them, they anchor future behavior. And third, resources. Yes, this includes money, but it also includes access, knowledge, and relationships. It's helping the next generation avoid the mistakes you made, navigate the systems you learned too late, or benefit from the network you've spent a lifetime building. Legacy becomes truly powerful when you combine financial assets with relational wisdom and emotional readiness. That brings us to a key insight. Legacy is something you live, not just something you leave. If you're waiting until your later years to do your legacy planning, you're missing the point. Legacy planning is not an event. It's a lifestyle. Every dollar you save, every conversation you initiate, every boundary you set, every story you tell. These aren't small moments, they're foundational bricks in something much bigger than yourself. But what stops most people from thinking this way? For many, it's fear. Fear of talking about death. Fear of not having enough to leave behind. Fear of family conflict. These are valid concerns, but they're not reasons to delay. Because the longer you wait, the more you leave to chance. And chance is rarely kind to legacy. Instead, choose clarity. Choose to define what matters to you before someone else does it for you. Choose to open the conversations you've avoided, not because they're easy, but because they're essential. Choose to lead, even if you're still learning yourself. One of the most empowering truths about legacy is this: you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to do it deliberately. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to start asking the right questions. What do I want my children or loved ones to know, not just about money, but about me? What stories do I want told around the table after I'm gone? What systems can I put in place today that will serve someone else tomorrow? What emotional and financial tools did I wish I had, and how can I give those now? When you begin thinking this way, you stop reacting and start designing. You begin to see your daily choices not just as personal finance, but as generational architecture. You're not just paying bills or making investments, you're creating the conditions for people you love to thrive long after you're gone. And here's something else. Legacy isn't only downward. It's not just about children or heirs. You can build legacy across mentors, friends, community, or even upward by helping your parents navigate aging and finances with dignity. Anyone you care about can be part of your legacy. Anyone whose life you touch, whose thinking you shape, whose future you help protect. That's legacy, too. Your legacy won't be defined by your net worth. It will be remembered by the trust you built, the wisdom you passed on, and the example you lived. That's the kind of wealth no market crash can erase, and it's available to anyone willing to live it, not just leave it. If there's one truth that cuts across generations, income levels, and backgrounds, it's this: people remember how you made them feel more than what you gave them. And that's where legacy takes on its most human form. It's not just about transferring what you've earned, it's about transmitting who you are. The tenderness in your guidance, the steadiness in your decisions, the integrity in your word. These leave fingerprints that don't fade, even when memories do. Sometimes, legacy shows up in surprising ways. A daughter might quote a lesson you never thought she heard. A friend might manage their finances differently because of one conversation you had over coffee. A grandchild might develop resilience not because they inherited wealth, but because they inherited your example of perseverance. These moments can't be written into a legal document, but they are inscribed into lives. And when we think about building wealth, we often forget that emotional intelligence and spiritual grounding are part of that wealth. A legacy without emotional grounding can feel hollow. But a legacy shaped by character, thoughtfulness, and relational strength becomes a lighthouse, a guiding presence, long after you're no longer physically present. There's something incredibly humbling and powerful about realizing that legacy doesn't require perfection, it simply requires participation. You don't have to wait until you have everything figured out. In fact, part of your legacy can be your vulnerability, your honesty about what you learned too late, and your willingness to help others avoid the same missteps. That transparency is a gift money can't buy, And so, legacy becomes not just a destination, but a discipline. Not a title, but a daily practice. Not just a plan, but a posture toward life, one of generosity, vision, and intentionality. When you start showing up with this kind of awareness, every small act of clarity compounds. And before long, you'll realize, you're not just building a legacy, you're already living one. Let's carry this clarity forward. The most powerful legacies aren't reserved for the wealthy. They're built by those who are willing to ask bold questions, take intentional steps, and lead from a place of purpose. And the earlier you start, the deeper your impact can become. Chapter 2. Starting Early: Why Legacy Planning Begins Now. There's a quiet myth that traps many people. The idea that legacy is something to think about later. After the kids are grown, after the business is sold, after retirement, after you've made it. But that myth steals time, momentum, and clarity from the very people who would benefit most from acting now. The truth is, the earlier you begin legacy planning, the stronger and more resilient that legacy becomes. Legacy, like wealth, is subject to the law of compounding. Every conversation you have, every system you build, every decision you make with intention today multiplies in value over the years. Waiting doesn't buy you more wisdom. It often just adds complexity. Time doesn't naturally bring clarity. It brings change. And if you haven't prepared for that change, you end up reacting instead of leading. One of the greatest misconceptions is that legacy planning is only for the old or the rich. But this belief ignores what legacy truly is. It's not a document you sign at 75. It's a series of habits, beliefs, and behaviors that begin shaping your story from the moment you become financially or emotionally responsible for someone, or even just for yourself. Think about it this way. Every time you set up a savings account, explain a financial principle to a friend, or model healthy boundaries with your money, you are laying bricks in the foundation of your legacy. The earlier you do it, the stronger it becomes, not just because of the financial effect, but because of the emotional stability and clarity it creates for others who look up to you. Waiting until later often means leaving others unprepared. Children grow up watching their parents interact with money, with decisions, with conflict, with responsibility. They learn more from observation than from advice. If they see avoidance, they adopt avoidance. If they see clarity and courage, they internalize it. So even if you feel like you haven't figured everything out yet, starting early means they get to witness your growth, and that becomes part of the legacy you leave. The same goes for business owners. Many entrepreneurs pour their energy into growth and scale, believing that legacy comes after success. But what if the business is the legacy? What if the systems you build, the culture you shape, and the people you mentor carry your influence far beyond your own career? That can't happen by accident. It requires foresight. Starting early also means you get to revise and evolve. Legacy planning, like life planning, isn't static. Your values might shift. Your priorities may grow. Your resources will change. If you start early, you give yourself the space to refine your plans, to test what works, and to communicate your wishes clearly over time, not all at once in a rushed, pressured moment. There's also a practical dimension to starting now. Life is unpredictable. Illness, accidents, and economic shifts don't wait for the right time. If something happened to you today, would your family know your intentions? Would your business partners have a clear transition plan? Would your children know your values, or just your assets? These aren't morbid questions. They're responsible ones. And the earlier you answer them, the less you leave to luck or assumption. But let's move beyond risk management. Starting early isn't just about protecting against the unexpected, it's about expanding what's possible. It opens up time for mentorship. It allows you to walk alongside the people you care about as they grow into responsibility, rather than dropping it on them all at once. It lets you give with joy, instead of leaving everything to be sorted out through legal documents and spreadsheets. You don't need to have large sums of money to begin. Even the smallest steps send signals. Writing a letter that outlines your values, creating a simple will, sharing your approach to generosity, starting a Roth IRA for your teenager, teaching someone how to budget. These acts don't require wealth. They require vision. And starting early brings a psychological shift as well. It reframes you from being someone who's just trying to figure things out to someone who is building intentionally. That change in posture affects how you relate to your family, your community, and even to yourself. You begin to walk with purpose. You feel the weight of your actions not in a burdensome way, but in a meaningful one. It also unlocks peace. When you've taken steps to clarify your wishes and your plan, you carry less stress. You're not afraid of what might happen if something goes wrong, because you've already created the guardrails. You're not overwhelmed by the complexity of the future, because you've broken it into pieces and started moving. That confidence becomes part of what you pass on, too. For couples, starting early invites conversation not just about money, but about meaning. What do we value most? What do we want our children to remember? How do we define success beyond numbers? These are the conversations that create alignment and connection. And when couples avoid them until later, the gap between assumptions and reality grows wider and sometimes unbridgeable. For single individuals, starting early sends a message of leadership and responsibility. It breaks the myth that legacy is only for those with direct heirs. Whether it's nieces, nephews, friends, community organizations, or future mentees, everyone has someone they can impact. Everyone has a story that deserves to be told with clarity and dignity. The most meaningful part of starting early is that it invites others into the process while you're still here to shape it. You can explain your decisions, share your reasons, and live your values out loud. That transparency builds trust, reduces conflict, and multiplies the emotional and relational return of your planning. And while financial tools like wills, trusts, insurance policies, and investment accounts play a role, they are not the starting point. The starting point is vision. It's clarity about who you are, what you value, and what you want to endure beyond your lifetime. When that vision is clear, the tools become powerful. When it's absent, the tools are just paper. The earlier you begin this journey, the more time you have to fine-tune, to teach, to test, and to lead by example. Legacy isn't a one-time transaction, it's a series of impressions, decisions, and conversations that build a living structure. And starting early is the only way to ensure that structure stands strong, reflects your character, and blesses those who come after you in more ways than money alone ever could. It's important to remember that starting early is not about having a complete legacy blueprint from day one. It's about letting your actions evolve in real time, alongside your values, your family, and your growth. When you begin while you're still actively learning, still building, still adjusting, that's when your legacy becomes truly human. It becomes accessible, adaptable, and alive. One of the often overlooked benefits of starting early is how it strengthens relationships. When you involve people early in your legacy process, whether that's your children, your spouse, your siblings, or your chosen family, you open space for shared understanding. You give them time to ask questions, absorb the why behind your choices, and even contribute ideas of their own. It becomes a two-way dialogue rather than a one-way instruction left behind. That kind of legacy lasts longer because it's owned, not just inherited. You also give yourself the gift of time to course correct. Legacy planning doesn't mean you'll never change your mind. But when you've started early, you can make adjustments gracefully, with full communication and context. You're not scrambling, you're not reacting. You're evolving, and the people around you are evolving with you. In the same way that compound interest grows money over time, the compound effect of consistent, early legacy action builds emotional, relational, and financial wealth that endures. A small conversation today can prevent a major conflict 10 years from now. A tiny habit now, like reviewing your financial documents annually or writing down family stories, can become a treasure chest for generations to come. Starting early doesn't just prepare others for the future. It prepares you to become the kind of person who leads with legacy. It shifts your thinking from survival to stewardship, from transactions to transformation, from earning for yourself to building for something greater than yourself. And once that mindset takes root, it becomes the foundation for everything that follows, because legacy is not a finish line. It's a way of living, and the sooner you begin, the richer and more meaningful the journey becomes. Let's now turn our attention to what that journey looks like in practice, how you can begin defining the values, habits, and structures that shape your legacy with clarity, conviction, and compassion. Chapter 3. Tools of Transfer: Wills, Trusts, and Structures that Work. When most people think of legacy, they imagine a will being read in a quiet attorney's office, with family members gathered around waiting to hear what has been passed on to them. But real legacy transfer isn't built in a single moment. It's built through thoughtful planning, clear legal tools, and structures that reduce confusion and conflict. Without those systems in place, even the most generous intentions can unravel into stress, disputes, and missed opportunities. At the heart of any effective legacy plan are a few core legal and financial tools. They're not glamorous, but they are powerful. And when used properly, they become bridges, allowing your values, your assets, and your clarity to cross from one generation to the next without getting lost in translation. The first and most basic of these tools is the will. A will is a legal document that outlines how your assets should be distributed after your death. It names the people or organizations you want to inherit your possessions, appoints guardians for minor children if necessary, and assigns someone called an executor to carry out your wishes. Without a will, the court steps in to make those decisions for you, and that process is called dying intestate. It's slow, impersonal, and often costly. Creating a will isn't just for the wealthy. If you own anything, a bank account, a car, a home, personal belongings, you have something to pass on. More importantly, if you care about how those items are distributed, or want to prevent disputes among loved ones, a will is essential. It's not a matter of how much you have. It's a matter of whether you want your voice to be heard when you're no longer here to speak. However, while a will is a vital part of legacy planning, it doesn't always cover everything. That's where trusts come in. A trust is a legal entity that holds and manages your assets on behalf of your chosen beneficiaries. It allows for more control over how and when your wealth is transferred. For example, instead of leaving a large sum of money to your child outright at age 18, you could use a trust to release funds over time or for specific purposes like education, housing, or starting a business. There are many types of trusts, but one of the most commonly used in legacy planning is the revocable living trust. This tool allows you to place assets into a trust during your lifetime, manage them as the trustee, and then pass them on smoothly after your death, without going through probate, the legal process that verifies a will. Avoiding probate means less court involvement, less delay, and often more privacy for your family. Trusts also protect against unexpected outcomes. If one of your heirs experiences financial trouble, legal issues, or divorce, a properly structured trust can prevent your legacy from being caught up in their complications. It adds a layer of protection not only for your assets but for the long-term well-being of those you care about. Another key tool is beneficiary designations. Many financial accounts like retirement plans, life insurance policies, and even some bank or brokerage accounts allow you to name a beneficiary. That means upon your death, those funds transfer directly to the person you've listed, bypassing the will and probate process entirely. It's one of the simplest, most overlooked ways to ensure fast and clear asset transfer. But here's the catch. Those designations override what's written in your will. If your will says one thing, but your account lists someone else, the account wins. That's why reviewing and updating beneficiary designations regularly is so important. There are also transfer on death, TOD, and payable on death, POD, designations, which function similarly but apply to different types of assets. A TOD might apply to a brokerage account, while a POD could apply to a checking or savings account. Both allow you to name who receives those funds after your passing, without court involvement. For property like your home, some states allow for a transfer on death deed, which can be a simple and cost-effective way to pass real estate directly to heirs. It's worth checking if this option exists in your state, as it could save your family thousands in legal fees and months of waiting. Beyond legal tools, structure also means organization. One of the greatest gifts you can leave your loved ones is a clear, accessible record of your legacy plan. This includes where your important documents are kept, how to access digital accounts, what insurance policies exist, who your advisors are, and any letters or statements of intent you wish to share. You might even create a legacy binder or digital vault to keep everything in one place. That structure reduces stress at one of the most emotionally vulnerable times in a person's life. When a loved one passes, grief alone can be overwhelming. Adding confusion, paperwork, and unanswered questions makes that grief heavier. A clear legacy plan is a way of saying, "I cared about you enough to make this easier." Clarity doesn't mean rigidity, though. A strong structure allows for flexibility. A good estate plan is one you can update as your life evolves when you get married, have children, move states, start a business, or experience loss. Your plan should be reviewed regularly and revised when needed. That doesn't mean redoing everything, it often means a few updates and check-ins to ensure alignment. It's also wise to have powers of attorney in place while you're alive. A durable power of attorney allows someone you trust to manage your finances if you become incapacitated. A healthcare power of attorney or living will outline your medical wishes and name someone to make decisions if you cannot. These tools aren't about death, they're about dignity, control, and clarity during life's uncertain moments. For business owners, succession planning is another layer of structure. Who will take over the business? Will it be sold, passed to a family member, or transitioned to a key employee? Without clear instructions and legal tools to back them up, even thriving businesses can collapse in the absence of their founder. The earlier you build those systems, the more stability you create for everyone involved. Of course, no structure is complete without communication. Legal tools are vital, but they should never be the only way your wishes are understood. The people in your life deserve not only to receive your legacy but to understand it, to know why you made the choices you did, to feel honored, not confused. That understanding often comes not from documents, but from conversations, heartfelt, honest, sometimes difficult conversations that bring context to the paperwork. In the end, structures work best when they are built with love, led with clarity, and supported by real-world knowledge. Legacy is not a treasure map left in a drawer. It is a living system of trust, thoughtfulness, and stewardship. The right tools don't just pass on wealth, they pass on peace. They pass on wisdom. They pass on the assurance that what you've built will endure not because of what it's worth in dollars, but because of how carefully it was protected, structured, and shared. One of the most overlooked aspects of legacy structures is the emotional clarity they provide, not just to your heirs, but to you. Knowing that your financial house is in order brings a kind of quiet confidence, a relief that ripples into how you live each day. It's easier to be generous when you've secured the essentials. It's easier to be present when you're not burdened by unspoken what-ifs. This is what real planning does. It lifts weight off your future and gives freedom to your present. And beyond the practical value, there's deep respect embedded in these tools. Respect for your work, your sacrifices, your story. Respect for those who'll come after you. You're not just handing over money or property, you're passing on intentionality. You're saying, "I thought this through because I care about your peace, not just your inheritance." That kind of love isn't loud, but it's powerful. It's felt when things go smoothly, when answers are clear, when confusion is replaced with calm. Sometimes people postpone legacy planning because they feel unqualified, like it's something for people with more assets, more knowledge, or more success. But the truth is, legacy isn't reserved for the ultra-wealthy. It's for anyone who wants to lead their financial story with clarity instead of chaos. A basic will with clearly named beneficiaries can do more for your family than a fortune left behind in disarray. The most meaningful wealth isn't just what you accumulate, but what you prepare, preserve, and pass on with purpose. And the earlier you begin that preparation with the right tools and open-hearted conversations, the stronger and more seamless your legacy becomes. Because when you combine structure with heart, planning with presence, you do more than transfer assets. You create something rare, continuity with intention, and from that foundation, you're ready to teach, to guide, and to prepare the next generation not just to receive wealth but to carry it forward wisely. Chapter 4. Teaching the next generation values, habits, and conversations. Legacy isn't just about passing down assets, it's about passing down understanding. You can leave your children wealth, but if they haven't learned how to manage it, protect it, and grow it, that inheritance can become a burden rather than a blessing. That's why one of the most critical elements of legacy building isn't what you give, but what you teach, and more importantly, how early and how often you teach it. Children don't learn financial wisdom from lectures, they absorb it from observation. They watch how you talk about money, how you react to bills, how you save, how you spend. Whether you realize it or not, you are modeling financial behavior every day. That's why intentional conversations matter not just once, not just during a crisis, but consistently, over time. Too often, money is a taboo topic in families. Parents try to protect children from the stress of financial realities, believing it's more responsible to shield them. But in doing so, they may inadvertently prevent their children from developing a healthy relationship with money. Silence breeds ignorance, and ignorance can become fear or worse, entitlement. Instead, the goal should be transparency appropriate to age and maturity. A child doesn't need to know your net worth to begin learning about budgeting. A teenager doesn't need access to your investment portfolio to start understanding how compound interest works. The most powerful financial lessons are rarely taught in one grand explanation. They're woven into everyday life, at the grocery store, at the dinner table, during family planning discussions. Teaching values starts with naming them. What principles do you want your children or heirs to carry forward? Is it generosity, responsibility, patience, work ethic, gratitude? These are the invisible assets that, once instilled, create stability far greater than a dollar amount ever could. If you want your children to honor what you've built, start by helping them understand why you built it the way you did. But values alone aren't enough. They must be paired with habits, simple, repeatable behaviors that reinforce discipline and decision-making. Teaching a child to divide their allowance into save, spend, and give categories is a habit. Showing a teenager how to track their expenses on a budgeting app is a habit. Walking through your monthly bills and explaining how choices affect outcomes, that's a habit too. Over time, habits become patterns, and patterns form character. One of the most powerful things you can do is share your mistakes. We often believe we need to appear perfect to teach others, especially our children. But vulnerability breeds connection. When you talk openly about a time you took on too much debt, or neglected to save, or made a poor investment, you turn a past regret into a present lesson. That kind of honesty makes the future feel safer, not because it promises perfection, but because it makes resilience real. Legacy conversations shouldn't be limited to immediate family either. In many families, grandparents, uncles, aunts, and even close family friends play critical roles in shaping beliefs around money and responsibility. A legacy culture thrives when more than one voice is involved, when aunts reinforce saving habits, when grandparents model charitable giving, when older cousins talk about building credit wisely. The broader the circle of influence, the stronger the legacy net becomes. One way to formalize these teachings is to create a family financial philosophy. This isn't a legal document, but a living one. It might be a shared mission statement that outlines how your family approaches money, what it values, what it avoids, and how it makes big decisions. It can evolve over time, but its purpose is to make the invisible visible, to articulate what may otherwise go unsaid. Another idea is to host an annual Legacy Day, or family finance check-in. This doesn't have to be heavy or formal. It can be as simple as reviewing where the family's charitable donations are going, walking through financial goals, or inviting questions about career planning, debt, or investing. The key is consistency and openness. Technology can also support these efforts. Encourage young adults to use budgeting apps, learn through financial podcasts, or simulate investing with educational tools before they manage real portfolios. You don't need to force them into mastery, you just need to help them feel that money is something they can understand, handle, and eventually lead. What's just as important as knowledge is attitude. Many young people grow up feeling anxiety about money, fearing they'll fail with it, or that it's inherently stressful, or that they'll never feel good enough to be financially stable. Part of teaching the next generation is reframing that story. Money is not an enemy, and wealth is not an accident. Financial confidence is built, not born. That message is one of the greatest legacies you can offer. It's also worth acknowledging that teaching legacy doesn't always go smoothly. Sometimes, the next generation resists the conversation. They may feel overwhelmed, indifferent, or even uncomfortable with the topic. That's okay. Don't force the door open, just keep knocking gently over time. Continue to model, invite, and include them. Many seeds take years to sprout, but they will, especially when planted with patience and respect. The strongest families don't always agree on everything, but they learn to talk about hard things, to honor each other's perspectives, and to hold space for growth. Financial literacy and legacy awareness should be part of that emotional DNA. When the younger generation sees money as a tool, not a mystery, not a curse, not a taboo, they become far more capable of carrying your legacy forward with wisdom and integrity. Ultimately, the goal isn't to control how the next generation uses what you've built. It's to prepare them to decide well. You want to equip them with discernment, not just direction, with judgment, not just instructions, with confidence, not just capital. When values are taught early, when habits are encouraged consistently, and when conversations remain open over time, the next generation becomes more than beneficiaries. They become builders. They don't just inherit your success, they embody your purpose. And that is when a legacy becomes more than lasting, it becomes living. Sometimes, the greatest challenge in teaching the next generation isn't the content, it's the consistency. Life gets busy, conversations get postponed, priorities shift. And yet, legacy education thrives not in grand, rare speeches, but in small, steady signals. A note in a lunchbox with a quote about generosity. A quiet moment watching you balance your accounts. A car ride conversation where you casually explain why you chose to buy used instead of new. These seemingly minor touchpoints are actually seeds, each one reinforcing a value, strengthening a mindset, or building emotional fluency around money. It's also important to recognize that different children absorb legacy teachings in different ways. One child may respond best to direct explanations and structured learning. Another might need to explore through trial and error, with space to ask questions and make small mistakes. And that's okay. Teaching legacy is not about uniformity, it's about being present, responsive, and adaptive to who they are becoming. There's a quiet power in modeling humility around money, admitting you don't know everything, inviting your children to help you research a financial decision, asking them what they would do in a given situation. These moments shift the relationship from teacher to student into something richer, mentor to fellow builder. It invites ownership. It gives them permission to think critically, to ask questions, and to become confident in their own financial voice. As children grow older, conversations can evolve into deeper terrain topics, like ethics in investing, giving with impact, wealth and identity, or navigating privilege with responsibility. These are not always easy discussions, but they are essential if the legacy you pass on is to be both durable and meaningful. Wealth without wisdom can unravel, but wealth paired with personal values and self-leadership can amplify across generations. And what happens when the next generation not only understands your financial story, but feels empowered to shape their own? That's when legacy truly becomes a living chain, not a static inheritance. It moves, evolves, breathes. Each generation contributes, refines, expands. And because the foundation was built not just on money, but on trust, transparency, and intention, what you began doesn't just endure, it flourishes. So as you reflect on your role as a teacher of legacy, remember this. You don't need to have every answer, but you do need to keep the conversation going. Because what you share today may be the very story they remember years from now when it's their turn to lead. And now, as we continue this journey, it's time to explore how legacy can endure not just through people but through planning that's built to last, across generations, with strength and clarity. Chapter 5. Avoiding the pitfalls: what destroys legacy and how to prevent it. Legacy, no matter how thoughtfully built, can be undone in a single generation. Not because of bad luck, but because of avoidable missteps, gaps in planning, communication, and emotional readiness. It's not enough to create a structure for passing down wealth. You must also anticipate what can derail it, and design your strategy to withstand time, pressure, and human complexity. To protect what you've built, you must be willing to confront what can break it. One of the most common pitfalls is lack of clarity. Families often assume everyone knows the plan or will figure it out when the time comes. But ambiguity is the enemy of peace. When wishes aren't clearly documented, confusion arises. When roles and responsibilities aren't defined, conflict brews. When heirs are left guessing about intentions or values, even well-meaning families can fracture under the weight of inheritance. Clarity doesn't come from a single conversation, it's a practice. It comes from revisiting your documents regularly, reviewing your will or trust language, updating beneficiaries, and most importantly, communicating with those impacted. Silence, even if rooted in good intentions, invites misunderstanding. What's unsaid becomes a blank space filled with assumptions, and assumptions are rarely generous. Another destroyer of legacy is poor preparation of heirs. It's tempting to focus all your energy on building the financial structure, trusts, tax shelters, property portfolios, while neglecting to equip the next generation with the emotional and practical tools to manage them. An unprepared heir isn't just at risk of squandering wealth, they're at risk of being overwhelmed by it. Inheritance without context can feel like a burden, not a blessing. Preparation means giving them more than access. It means giving them agency, the ability to steward, decide, and adapt. Entitlement is another corrosive force. When money arrives without effort, context, or gratitude, it can disconnect people from the values that created it. It's why some heirs develop a distorted relationship with wealth, seeing it as proof of status instead of a resource for impact. Teaching the story behind the wealth, who built it, how, and why, restores the human thread. It reintroduces meaning. Without that connection, money becomes hollow, and hollow legacies crumble quickly. Family conflict is another legacy killer. Disagreements about inheritance, roles, or fairness can erupt into long-lasting rifts. Sometimes, these conflicts are born of old wounds unrelated to money, but money becomes the battlefield. Preventing this means being proactive. Include your heirs in conversations early. Encourage transparency. If tensions exist, consider bringing in a family mediator or financial therapist. Don't let discomfort silence you. Silence only delays the storm. Equally dangerous is over-control. Some legacy plans are written with such rigidity that they choke future flexibility. They attempt to micromanage decisions long after the creator is gone, leaving heirs feeling boxed in, second-guessed, or powerless. While it's important to provide guidance, too much restriction can signal distrust. The balance lies in setting guardrails, not cages. Leave room for evolution, for different seasons of life, for the possibility that what worked for you may not work in a world that's changing fast. Neglecting tax strategy is another way legacies are weakened. Tax laws shift, and what worked 10 years ago may no longer be efficient. Without regular reviews, your estate could be subject to unnecessary burdens, reducing what reaches your intended beneficiaries. Partnering with a knowledgeable estate planner or tax advisor isn't just smart, it's essential. This isn't about beating the system, it's about honoring what you've earned by ensuring it goes where it's meant to go. A more subtle pitfall is disconnecting legacy from everyday life. If legacy only shows up in legal documents and not in daily decisions, it becomes abstract, something to be handled later. But when legacy is lived, not just planned, it stays anchored. This means letting your values show up in how you spend, how you give, how you talk. When your children see you being generous, thoughtful, or disciplined, they don't just hear your legacy, they experience it. That's what makes it real. Then there's the risk of burnout, especially for those who carry the emotional and logistical load of managing family wealth. Being the responsible one can become isolating. If leadership isn't shared, if succession isn't discussed, if burdens aren't acknowledged, legacy can feel more like a weight than a gift. The solution is shared stewardship. Don't try to do it alone. Invite others into the work. Mentor, delegate, collaborate. Legacy isn't about martyrdom, it's about continuity. And finally, perhaps the greatest threat to legacy is avoidance. The belief that we'll get to it eventually, or there's still time. But the truth is, We don't know when our window of clarity will close. We don't know when life will shift, when illness will arrive, when decisions will no longer be ours to make. Waiting doesn't protect legacy, it exposes it. The sooner you act, the more options you have, the more intentional you can be, and the more grace you can offer those you love. Avoiding these pitfalls doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It requires honesty, a willingness to face discomfort, and the humility to ask for help. It requires returning again and again to your why. Why does this legacy matter? Who is it for? What do you want them to feel, carry, and contribute? Because the most enduring legacies aren't defined by the assets they transfer, but by the trust, the clarity, and the love they preserve. When you protect those, your legacy doesn't just survive, it stands. Another often ignored threat to legacy is the assumption that your family already knows how you feel. Many people operate on the belief that love is obvious, that intentions are clear, that presence equals understanding. But emotional legacies, like financial ones, suffer when left unspoken. Your family needs to hear your story, not just what you did, but why you did it. They need to hear your hopes for them, your perspective on what really matters, and your faith in their ability to carry it forward. Without these conversations, even the most generous inheritance can feel incomplete. What's tragic is that these moments don't require grand speeches or perfectly written letters. Often, it's the quiet acknowledgments that land the hardest, a parent saying, "I trust your judgment," a grandparent whispering, "You remind me of myself, and I believe in your future." These words cost nothing, but they shape everything. They give confidence, they transmit identity. And when paired with thoughtful planning, they transform an estate plan into a living expression of care. Another overlooked factor is the illusion that complexity equals effectiveness. Some people, in an effort to be sophisticated or do it right, build overly complicated structures, layers of trusts, obscure tax strategies, or convoluted instructions. But legacy that's too difficult to understand is difficult to honor. Complexity without clarity becomes a burden. Instead of empowering your heirs, it can paralyze them. And worst of all, it may require expensive advisors to untangle it, draining time, energy, and resources that could have been preserved through simplicity. True strength in legacy comes not from how complex it is, but how clear it is. Your plan should speak plainly to the people it's meant to guide. It should anticipate their questions, ease their fear, and offer them choices, not chains. And if there's anything in your plan that only you understand, consider revisiting it. Your legacy should not depend on your ongoing explanation. It should be strong enough to stand on its own. Let's also talk about reconciliation. Sometimes, the greatest act of legacy building is healing what was broken. That may mean mending a strained relationship, reaching out to someone you've grown distant from, or addressing unresolved tension that could complicate the future. Many people postpone these acts, thinking there will be a better time. But reconciliation, like legacy, has a window. When it's open, even briefly, stepping through it can change the course of generations. A conversation you feared could be the very one that saves your family from years of resentment. And even if full healing doesn't happen, the effort itself sends a signal that love is more important than pride, and that peace is part of the wealth you want to pass on. In the end, what truly destroys legacy isn't just conflict, or confusion, or mismanagement. It's neglect. The belief that legacy is automatic, that it will take care of itself. That writing a will is the final act. But legacy isn't a finish line, it's a living system, one that needs attention, updates, conversations, and reflection. Just like a garden, it must be tended, or weeds will find their way in. But here's the beautiful truth. Every single pitfall can be prevented. Every one. With courage, communication, and commitment, you can fortify your legacy against the storms of time and human nature. You can create something not only durable, but beautiful, something your family doesn't just inherit, but treasures. And now that we've explored what to guard against, it's time to turn our attention to what makes a legacy thrive. Let's explore how to build one that is not just protected but powerfully alive across generations. Chapter 6. Living the Legacy: How to Lead Now and Leave Well. Legacy isn't something that begins when you pass, it begins with how you live. Too often, people speak about legacy as a concept tied to the end of life, something to be considered in old age or after a career has concluded. But the most meaningful legacies are not written in a final will. They are authored daily, in the choices you make, the values you uphold, and the example you set. To lead well later, you must learn how to lead now. To leave a meaningful legacy, you must live that legacy with intention. Leadership, in the context of legacy, is not about authority. It's about responsibility. It means showing others what integrity looks like under pressure. It means navigating money not with fear or secrecy, but with clarity and generosity. It means living in a way that reflects your values not just in big moments, but in the quiet ones when no one is watching. The way you pay a bill, support a struggling friend, give to your community, or talk about failure, these moments define your legacy far more than any financial bequest. Your habits speak volumes. If you live beneath your means, that becomes a quiet education. If you invest patiently, give thoughtfully, or talk openly about mistakes and recovery, you give your family a roadmap more powerful than any spreadsheet. When you face a financial challenge and handle it with humility and resolve, you model resilience. When you prioritize people over possessions, you show them what wealth is really for. Legacy is not stored in documents. It is stored in memory. Another critical part of living your legacy is being intentional about presence. Many people believe their most valuable contribution is material, but what your family and community often need most is your attention. To be fully present with your time, your listening, your mentorship, is to gift others something rare and irreplaceable. The richest legacies are those remembered not just for what they gave, but for how they made people feel. Time and again, we hear stories of children who barely remember the exact amount left to them but vividly remember the life lessons shared, the rituals upheld, the moments of vulnerability and courage. These are the echoes of legacy. These are what get passed on. It's not the dollar amount, it's the depth of relationship. To live your legacy also means aligning your money with your mission. That may mean using your investments to support causes you believe in. It might look like mentoring younger entrepreneurs in your field, or volunteering your expertise to community efforts. It may mean making choices that aren't the most profitable, but feel most aligned with your integrity. Legacy leadership is values in action. Importantly, living the legacy is also about communication. Too many people plan in isolation, assuming their documents will speak for them. But words on paper can only do so much. They lack tone, nuance, intention. If you want your legacy to be carried with warmth and fidelity, you must communicate it in person through stories, conversations, and shared decisions. This doesn't mean revealing every financial detail, but it does mean being open about why you've made the choices you've made. When you talk about your legacy while you're still living it, you give your family the opportunity to ask, to learn, to understand. You eliminate surprises, reduce anxiety, and cultivate trust. You give them the chance to engage in the work, not just inherit its results. And that is how legacies become self-sustaining. When they are co-authored, when they are not handed down from on high, but built hand in hand. Another element of legacy leadership is self-reflection. It's tempting to assume we're always passing down wisdom, but sometimes we're also passing down pain, fear, or outdated beliefs. The act of building legacy asks us to reflect on what we want to keep and what we need to release. What are the money patterns you've inherited that no longer serve you? What stories about success, failure, worth, or scarcity do you want your children to unlearn? Part of living the legacy is having the courage to rewrite your own narrative, so that the one they inherit is healthier and freer. This also means making peace with imperfection. No legacy is flawless. You will make mistakes. You may change your mind. You may wish you had started sooner. But legacy isn't about doing everything right. It's about doing the next thing right. It's about being honest, staying humble, and continuing to show up with intention. Your humanity doesn't weaken your legacy. It's what makes it real. And sometimes, the most powerful way to live your legacy is to let go of control. This is especially true for those who struggle with the idea that others may not do things the way they would. But legacy is not a mechanism for obedience. It's a framework for empowerment. If your heirs are to thrive, they must have the space to adapt, experiment, and even fail. Living your legacy means trusting others enough to lead in their own way. It means planting seeds you may never see bloom and being at peace with that. Finally, living your legacy includes preparing emotionally and spiritually to leave it well. That doesn't mean rushing toward the end. It means acknowledging that one day, your voice will no longer be here, and choosing to fill the space you occupy now with clarity, love, and purpose. It means writing the letters, having the conversations, recording the stories, capturing the essence of who you are, so that those who follow feel guided, not lost. You don't need to be wealthy to leave a legacy. You need to be willing to live with meaning, willing to lead with heart, willing to act not just for today, but with generations in mind. Because when you live your legacy, the impact begins now, not someday, and it echoes longer, stronger, and more beautifully than you could ever imagine. There's one more truth that often gets overlooked when we talk about legacy. It isn't just something you leave behind, it's something you leave within. Long after the money is distributed, after the estate is settled and the paperwork fades into archives, what remains is how people felt when they were around you. Did they feel seen, encouraged, trusted? Did your presence help them become more of who they were meant to be? Living your legacy means recognizing that every interaction is an imprint. The way you speak to the barista who gets your coffee, the patience you show to a child, trying to explain something, the grace you offer when someone fails, including yourself. These things accumulate. They become part of the emotional architecture of your family, your friendships, your community, and while they may not show up on a balance sheet, they often matter more than anything that does. In fact, many of the most cherished legacies are quiet ones. A grandmother who wrote in a journal every day and passed it on. A father who always showed up for school, plays no matter how tired he was. A neighbor who mowed lawns for the elderly without ever asking for thanks. These acts of leadership, small and steady, create a ripple that never fully ends. They teach that legacy isn't about being remembered, it's about making others feel worth remembering. There's also great power in storytelling. If you want your legacy to breathe beyond your lifetime, don't just leave assets, leave stories. Stories of your struggles, your choices, your turning points. Stories of who you once were and how you grew. These stories are more than sentimental, they're survival tools. They help your children and grandchildren feel less alone in their own uncertainties. They serve as anchors in seasons of doubt, proof that transformation is possible, that courage can coexist with imperfection. And don't underestimate the legacy of joy. Too many people become so consumed with protecting and preserving that they forget to enjoy. Laughter, spontaneity, celebration, these too are part of what you leave behind. When your family remembers you, they should remember not only your wisdom but your lightness, your ability to live well, to find meaning, and to give others permission to do the same. So ask yourself, what kind of story do I want others to continue? What chapters have I begun that they can build upon? What values do I want to echo in rooms I'll never enter? What examples am I living that will speak louder than anything I could ever write? Because in the end, legacy is less about the assets you divide and more about the life you multiplied. And when you choose to lead that life fully, openly, intentionally, you're not just preparing to leave something behind. You're already passing something forward. Legacy isn't reserved for the wealthy. It isn't a reward for having lived perfectly, or a trophy earned at the finish line of life. Legacy is a choice. It's a decision to live with direction, to act with purpose, and to shape the future through every ordinary moment you choose to elevate. It doesn't begin in some far-off tomorrow. It begins right here, right now, with what you value, how you lead, and who you become when no one's looking. You don't have to wait for a milestone, a windfall, or a major life event to start crafting your legacy. Every time you pause to teach instead of criticize, to give instead of hoard, to listen instead of assume, you are planting the roots of something enduring. Legacy is not a spotlight, it's a candle passed hand to hand. It lives in the habits you demonstrate, the stories you tell, the wisdom you pass on quietly and consistently. Ask yourself, what would the ancestor you wish you had do today? Would they speak up with kindness? Would they invest in knowledge? Would they break cycles of silence, fear, or shame? Would they lead with love? You have the power to be that person, not someday, but this day. You have the power to draw a line in the sand and say, "It changes with me." This audiobook wasn't just about wills or trusts or financial structures. It was about becoming someone who shapes not only the fate of money but the future of people. You are not just a manager of assets. You are a builder of lives. The decisions you make today can ripple into generations you will never meet, influencing hearts, dreams, and destinies. So, lead with clarity, act with courage, and pass forward a legacy not of perfection, but of deep intention. The future is already listening. Now is the time to speak not only with your words, but with your life. Your legacy starts today. Make it one worth remembering.